Morgan's cologne still hung in the air hours after he'd slammed the door of our suburban home. I sat motionless at our kitchen island, staring at the email draft I'd prepared weeks ago, but never thought I'd actually need to send. The marble countertop felt cold against my arms as I reread his text message for the 20th time. Working late again. Don't wait up. Another lie to add to the growing collection. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification from my banking app had come through just minutes after his message. A charge at Oriole, the upscale restaurant downtown where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. A restaurant he would never waste on just a business. Dinner. My trembling finger hovered over the security camera app on my phone. I didn't want to look, but I needed confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. There he was, my husband of 15 years, helping Vanessa Reynolds out of her sleek BMW in our driveway at 2:17 p.m. when he was supposedly at a critical meeting with investors. Vanessa, his ambitious new marketing director with an MBA from Wharton and family connections stretching from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Everything I supposedly wasn't. You need to stop spying on him, my sister Kate had warned me last week. It's only going to hurt you more. She was right about the pain, but wrong about the spying. Without it, I would never have discovered that the company Morgan had built from the ground up, the company that had consumed our marriage, our life, our everything, was in serious financial trouble. Without it, I would never have found the opportunity to change everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Morgan had dismissed my business suggestions with patronizing pats on the head. Stick to what you know, Olivia. The kids' schedules and grocery shopping are complicated enough. As if my finance degree from Northwestern and 3 years at Goldman Sachs before our children were born had somehow evaporated from my resume and my brain. I took a deep breath and opened the secure encrypted email inbox I'd created months ago. The notification I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Transaction complete. All paperwork finalized. Congratulations on your acquisition. My hands shook slightly as I closed the laptop. Through a complex series of shell companies and investment vehicles, I had just become the majority shareholder of Pendleton Tech Solutions, my husband's company. The company he had claimed was too complex for me to understand. The company now drowning in debt that I had secretly purchased for a fraction of its former value. And he had no idea. The front door opened, and Morgan's heavy footsteps crossed the foyer. I quickly switched screens to a recipe for tomorrow's dinner. Still up? His voice carried the artificial brightness he'd adopted recently, along with a hint of expensive whiskey. His blue dress shirt was slightly wrinkled, and a smudge of red lipstick was just visible on his collar, not even trying to hide it anymore. Just planning meals for the week, I replied, giving him the domestic answer he expected. How was your meeting? Productive. He loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch from the crystal decanter on the bar cart. We might be bringing in some major new investment soon. Too bad you wouldn't understand the details. He smirked, taking a long sip. Business stuff. I bit my tongue, the weight of what I knew pressing against my chest like a stone. The major new investment was a fantasy. According to the financial records I'd obtained, Pendleton Tech was hemorrhaging cash and on the verge of insolvency. The only major investment had come from me, through channels he would never think to investigate. How's Vanessa working out? I asked casually, watching his face for the tell, the slight twitch of his left eye that had always betrayed his. Lies. There it was. She's fine, competent. Why do you ask? Just curious. You mention her often. I closed my laptop with deliberate calm. She sounds impressive. Morgan's expression softened into the condescending smile I'd grown to despise. She's a professional, Liv. Career-driven. Understands the business world. He gestured vaguely at the kitchen around us. Different priorities than all this. All this. The family home where we'd raised our children. The life I'd built while he chased success and, apparently, his marketing director. I didn't mean it like that, he backpedaled, seeing my expression harden. It's just, you've been out of the professional loop for so long. Things have changed. Business is more cutthroat than when you were dabbling in finance. Dabbling. My 3 years. Managing portfolios worth billions had been reduced to dabbling. I swallowed the rage rising in my throat. You're probably right, I said softly, gathering my things. It's getting late. I should head to bed. I'll be up soon, he lied again, already reaching for the decanter for a refill. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my phone vibrated, with a message from Rachel, my former college roommate, and now a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. All systems go for tomorrow. Are you ready? I texted back a single word. Ready. Tomorrow, at the quarterly all-hands meeting of Pendleton Tech Solutions, the company's mysterious new majority owner would be revealed. And Morgan would finally learn that his just-a-stay-at-home mom wife had been several steps ahead of EI. Him all along. I barely slept that night, listening to Morgan stumble up the stairs at 3 a.m. and collapse into the guest bedroom down the hall, not even bothering with excuses anymore. In the darkness, I replayed the path that had led us here, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when my husband had stopped seeing me as a partner and started viewing me as an accessory, a convenience, a live-in nanny who kept his perfect home, running while he built his empire and pursued other women. Perhaps it was 3 years ago when I'd suggested refinancing our mortgage to take advantage of lower interest rates, and he'd laughed, saying, "Leave the financial decisions to me, babe. You just focus on keeping the kids in line." Or maybe it was at last year's company Christmas party when he'd introduced me to a new client simply as my wife, without mentioning my name, then steered the conversation away when I'd tried to join a discussion about market trends. The disrespect had been so gradual, so insidious, that I'd normalized it until I barely recognized myself anymore. The confident financial analyst who once commanded boardrooms had become a woman who doubted her own intelligence, who apologized for having opinions, who hid her business journals under cookbooks so Morgan wouldn't mock her for pretending to keep up. But everything had changed 6 months ago. I'd been searching for Morgan's passport in his home office when I discovered a stack of overdue notices and alarming financial projections hidden in his desk drawer. Curiosity piqued. I'd installed a keylogger on his rarely used home computer and gained access to his business email. What I found shocked me. Pendleton Tech, despite its glossy exterior and Morgan's constant bragging, was in serious trouble. A series of poor investments, an ill-advised expansion, and Morgan's excessive personal spending had left the company cash poor and overextended. Worse, he was hiding this from the board, manipulating financial reports, and frantically searching for new investors while maintaining a facade of success. The company he'd once valued at $30 million would be lucky to sell for $5 million in its current state. That's when the idea first took root. I still had my personal inheritance from my grandmother, approximately $3 million that Morgan knew nothing about. I'd kept it separate, a decision that had offended him years ago. Don't you trust me to manage it? But which now seemed divinely prescient. I also had connections from my Goldman days, people who still respected my financial acumen despite my years away from the industry. Crafting the plan had given me purpose I hadn't felt in years. Working with Rachel and my old mentor Xavier Phillips, I created a series of shell companies that couldn't be traced back to me. Through these entities, I began quietly purchasing Pendleton Tech's debt at discounted rates, positioning myself to take control when the moment was right. The alarm clock jolted me from my thoughts at 6 a.m. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, selecting a sleek charcoal pantsuit I'd purchased specifically for this day, pairing it with the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me along with the inheritance that would change everything. My hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail for school drop-offs and grocery runs, was styled in a sophisticated bob that framed my face, making me look more like the financial executive I once was than the mother of three I'd become. Morgan was already gone when I came downstairs, having left early to prepare for the all-hands meeting where he would once again try to project confidence and stability to increasingly skeptical employees. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He hadn't even bothered to brew coffee or leave a note. "Mom, you look different," my 13-year-old daughter Emma observed, glancing up from her cereal bowl. "Like, fancy different." "I have an important meeting today," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "But it's Tuesday. You volunteer at the library on Tuesdays," my 10-year-old son Aiden pointed out, confusion furrowing his brow. "Not today, buddy. Today is special." I kissed the top of his head. "Grandma's picking you up from school. I might be home late." After dropping the kids off, I drove not to my usual coffee shop or the library, but to Rachel's law firm in the heart of the financial district. The sleek glass building seemed to reach endlessly skyward, a monument to power and success that had once been familiar territory to me. "There she is," Rachel greeted me with a fierce hug when I entered the conference room on the 47th floor. "The financial ninja? Ready to blow some minds today?" Xavier Phillips, silver-haired and impeccably dressed as always, rose to shake my hand. "Olivia, you look every inch the corporate raider." "I'm not a raider," I corrected him with a smile. "I'm a savior. The company needs competent leadership, not a hostile takeover." "Semantics," Rachel waved dismissively. "The important thing is that we have everything in place. The voting shares are securely in your control through Artemis Holdings. The board has been notified of new ownership and the emergency meeting following the all-hands. Morgan has no idea what's coming." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing the strategy. I would arrive at Pendleton Tech just as the all-hands meeting was concluding. Rachel would accompany me as my legal counsel. The board would already have been informed of the ownership change, but sworn to confidentiality until the formal announcement. "Remember," Xavier advised as we prepared to leave, "Morgan will try to discredit you, to paint this as emotional or irrational. Don't take the bait. Stay focused on the numbers, the business strategy, the path forward. That's your strength." I nodded, surprising myself with how calm I felt. The nervous energy that had kept me awake all night had transformed into something steelier, more resolute. "One more thing," Rachel added, handing me a slim leather portfolio. "The preliminary audit results. They're worse than we thought. The company has barely 6 weeks of operating capital left at current burn rates. He's been using creative accounting to hide it, but Pendleton Tech is essentially insolvent." "Then it's a good thing I got there first," I replied, tucking the portfolio into my briefcase. "Ready?" The Pendleton Tech Solutions headquarters occupied 3 floors of a modern office building downtown. I'd attended company parties here, always on Morgan's arm as the supportive wife, but had never arrived, alone with purpose. The security guard's eyes widened slightly as I approached, clearly recognizing me but confused by my presence without Morgan. "Mrs. Pendleton." He nodded respectfully. "The all-hands meeting is in progress in the main conference center." "Perfect. Timing," I replied, accepting the visitor badge he offered. "Floor 14, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Would you like me to let Mr. Pendleton know you're here?" "No need," I smiled. "I'd like to surprise him." Rachel and I rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the 14th floor, we could hear Morgan's voice carrying from the large conference room down the hall. The confident, charismatic tone he used when selling his vision to others. Despite market challenges, Pendleton Tech remains on solid footing. Our proprietary software solutions continue to gain traction, and we're in discussions with several major investors who recognize our potential. We paused outside the double doors. Through the small windows, I could see about 60 employees seated in rows, facing away from us toward the stage where Morgan stood with a PowerPoint presentation. Vanessa Reynolds sat in the front row, nodding encouragingly at whatever fabrication he was spinning. "Ready?" Rachel whispered. I took a deep breath and pushed the doors open. The slight creak caused a few heads to turn, and a ripple of confusion spread through the room as employees recognized me. Morgan faltered mid-sentence, confusion crossing his face as he spotted me walking confidently down the center aisle, Rachel, beside me. "Olivia," he called from the stage, a forced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "This is unexpected. We're in the middle of a company meeting." "I know," I replied, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "Please continue. I believe you were discussing the company's financial position and potential investors." His eyes narrowed slightly, that left eye twitching with nervous tension. "We can catch up later. This is an internal business discussion. And as the majority shareholder of Pendleton Tech Solutions, I'm very interested in hearing it," I said evenly. The room went completely silent. Morgan froze, his mouth slightly open, PowerPoint clicker suspended in midair. In the front row, Vanessa Reynolds swiveled to stare at me, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows nearly reaching her hairline. "What did you just say?" Morgan finally managed, his voice strangled. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess," I suggested, addressing the room at large. "I believe the board is waiting for us in the executive conference room to discuss the company's new direction." As if on cue, the CFO, William Chen, appeared at the side door. "Mr. Pendleton, the board has convened as requested by Artemis Holdings. They're waiting for you and—" He hesitated, looking at me with new understanding. "And the new majority owner." Morgan's face had drained of all color. "This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied calmly. Artemis Holdings completed the acquisition of 58% of Pendleton Tech's shares and outstanding debt yesterday. The paperwork has been filed and verified. Perhaps if you checked your business email more carefully between dinner dates at Oriole, you would have noticed the notifications. A few gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. Vanessa sank lower in her chair. "We should continue this discussion privately," Morgan snapped, finally recovering enough to realize he was losing face in front of his entire company. He turned to the bewildered employees. "Meeting adjourned. Please return to your departments." As the staff filed out, throwing curious glances our way, Morgan stormed off the stage and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a side door. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed. Rachel smoothly intercepted, placing herself between us. "I suggest you remove your hand from my client, Mr. Pendleton. The board is waiting, and I believe there's a great deal to discuss about your management of company resources and reporting practices." The executive conference room was icy with tension when we entered. The 6 board members sat rigidly around the mahogany table, expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Most had met me at company functions, but clearly never considered me more than Morgan's decorative appendage. "Please, everyone take your seats," directed Patricia Winters, the board chairwoman, a formidable woman in her 60s who had always treated me with polite indifference at company events. "It appears we have significant developments to address." Morgan took his usual seat at the head of the table, only to find Patricia gesturing to an empty chair to her right. "Mr. Pendleton, in light of the ownership changes, perhaps you'd be more comfortable here." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Morgan had been literally displaced. I took the seat at the head of the table, placing my briefcase carefully before me, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Rachel positioned herself just behind my right shoulder, a silent but unmistakable show of support. "I believe introductions, Are in order, I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Most of you know me as Morgan's wife. Today, I'm here as the controlling shareholder of Pendleton Tech Solutions, operating through my investment vehicle, Artemis Holdings. And this is absurd, Morgan interrupted. My wife knows nothing about running a tech company. She's been a stay-at-home mom for 12 years. Before that, I managed a $4 billion portfolio at Goldman Sachs, I countered smoothly. And more recently, I've orchestrated the acquisition of a technology company while its CEO was otherwise occupied. I believe that demonstrates adequate business acumen. Patricia Winters cleared her throat. Our legal team has verified the share transfers. Ms. Rachel Thompson provided the documentation this morning. Artemis Holdings, which we now understand, is controlled by Mrs. Pendleton, has indeed acquired majority control. By what means? Morgan demanded, his face flushing with anger. Where would you even get that kind of money? My grandmother's inheritance, I answered simply. The one you wanted me to let you invest 7 years ago. The one I kept separate because, how did you put it? Women are too emotional to handle serious money. I invested it quite successfully on my own. Morgan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. More pressing than how I acquired the company, I continued, turning to address the full board, is the state in which I found it. I opened my briefcase and distributed copies of the preliminary audit report Rachel had given me earlier. This independent analysis shows that Pendleton Tech is in far worse financial condition than has been reported in quarterly statements. In fact, the company has been functionally insolvent for months, with financial reports manipulated to hide the severity of the situation. The board members began flipping through the documents, expressions of alarm spreading around the table. These accusations are outrageous, Morgan sputtered. This is nothing but a vindictive attack because of personal issues between us. The numbers speak for themselves, I replied calmly. As do the discrepancies between internal financial projections and what was presented to this board. The personal issues you reference, by which I assume you mean your affair with Ms. Reynolds, are indeed regrettable, but entirely separate from my business decisions. Another wave of uncomfortable glances circled the room. Morgan's infidelity was now explicitly on the record. What exactly are your intentions, Mrs. Pendleton? Patricia Winters asked, her tone considerably more respectful than it had been at our last social encounter. To save this company, I said simply. Despite current mismanagement, Pendleton Tech has valuable intellectual property, a talented development team, and significant potential. What it needs is transparent financial reporting, strategic restructuring, and leadership focused on sustainable growth rather than personal enrichment. I looked directly at Morgan as I added, the company credit card should not be used for romantic dinners, weekend getaways, or gifts of jewelry that never made it home. His face went from red to purple. You've been spying on me? I've been investigating financial improprieties at a company I was considering purchasing, I corrected him. Standard due diligence. William Chen, the CFO who had always seemed decent if somewhat cowed by Morgan, spoke up hesitantly. These projections in the audit, they match what I originally calculated before. He trailed off, looking nervously at Morgan. Before you were instructed to adjust them to tell a better story? I finished for him. Yes, I imagine they do. For the next hour, we discussed the company's true financial position and my proposed recovery strategy. I outlined immediate steps: a freeze on executive expenses, renegotiation of the office lease, strategic layoffs in overstaffed departments, beginning with marketing, I noted without looking at Morgan, and acceleration of the most promising product development tracks. As the meeting concluded, Patricia Winters looked at me with newfound respect. It seems we've underestimated you, Mrs. Pendleton. The board will need to digest this information, but your assessment and proposals appear sound. I suggest we reconvene tomorrow to formalize the leadership transition. I'll clear my calendar, I agreed, standing to signal the meeting's end. As the board members filed out, Morgan remained seated, staring at the table with a stunned expression that had yet to fully process the seismic shift that had just occurred. "Olivia," he finally said when we were alone except for Rachel, who refused to leave my side. "You can't do this to me. The company is my life's work." "The company," I replied, gathering my papers, "is now my responsibility, and I intend to save it, despite your best efforts to run it into the ground." "This is about Vanessa, isn't it?" he asked, revealing just how completely he had misunderstood everything. "You could have just confronted me instead of this. Corporate takeover drama." "This," I said carefully, "is about consequences, Morgan. For years you've dismissed me, belittled my intelligence, and taken for granted everything I contributed to your success. You called me just a stay-at-home mom, as if that were something shameful or insignificant, while I managed our home, raised our children, and apparently developed better business sense than you have." I closed my briefcase with a definitive click. "The board meets at 9 tomorrow morning. I suggest you use the intervening time to prepare a thorough accounting of your expenditures and decision-making. Your future role at Pendleton Tech, if any, will depend on your transparency." As I walked out of the conference room, leaving Morgan staring after me in disbelief, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Years of diminishment, of carefully swallowing my opinions, of pretending to be less than I was. All of it falling away with each click of my heels against the polished floor. Rachel squeezed my arm as we waited for the elevator. "That," she said with undisguised admiration, "was the most satisfying board meeting I've ever attended." I smiled, the expression feeling unfamiliar but welcome on my face. "It's just the beginning." Leaving the Pendleton Tech building felt surreal. The confident strides that carried me through the lobby contrasted sharply with the dazed disbelief still swimming in my chest. Had I really just done that? The security guard who had questioningly admitted me earlier now held the door with newfound respect, his "Good afternoon, Mrs. Pendleton," carrying a different weight than it had just hours before. "Your car is waiting," Rachel said, gesturing to the sleek black sedan idling at the curb. "I thought we might need a professional driver today. Celebratory drinks are in order." I glanced at my watch, 3:15 p.m. I need to be home by 5:30 for the kids. Rachel's laugh was gentle, but pointed. "Olivia, you just executed a multi-million-dollar corporate takeover. You can afford a sitter for one night." The thought hadn't even occurred to me. For 12 years, my schedule had revolved entirely around my children's needs. The idea of spontaneous celebration felt almost forbidden. "I'll call my mother," I decided, pulling out my phone as we slid into the back seat of the sedan. "She's already picking them up from school." As the car merged into traffic, my phone erupted with notifications. News traveled fast. Board members had clearly wasted no time discussing the morning's events with colleagues. LinkedIn requests from Pendleton Tech executives who had previously ignored my existence. 3 voicemails from Morgan, each time-stamped minutes apart, the progression of his anger likely documented in digital audio. I ignored them all, calling my mother instead. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Mom answered, concern immediately evident in her voice. I rarely called during school hours. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. Would you mind keeping the kids overnight? I have some business to finish up." "Business?" The curiosity in her tone was unmistakable. Mom had watched my slow erasure over the years, had gently suggested therapy when I stopped correcting Morgan's condescension, had offered repeatedly to fund a passion project to get me out of the house. "I'll explain everything tomorrow. There's pizza money in the drawer by the fridge. Just..." "Thank you." "Olivia Jean Pendleton," my mother said, using my full name as she had since childhood when she sensed evasion. "What have you done?" I smiled, feeling the giddy bubble of long-suppressed triumph rising in my throat. I reclaimed myself, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow. Rachel directed the driver to a rooftop lounge in the financial district, a sleek establishment where she apparently held enough clout to secure a private corner table despite the afternoon crowd. Xavier Phillips was already waiting, 2 associates from his investment firm beside him. There she is, Xavier stood, embracing me with uncharacteristic warmth. The conquering heroine returns. We ordered champagne, and I found myself recounting the board meeting in detail, Morgan's stunned expression, Patricia Winter's dawning respect, the CFO's careful validation of my financial assessment. With each retelling, the reality of what I'd accomplished began to solidify. To Olivia, Rachel raised her glass when I finished, who reminded us all today that underestimating women is a costly mistake. What happens tomorrow? Asked Elise. Chen, one of Xavier's associates, after the toast. Pendleton will fight back. Men like him always do. He'll try, Xavier agreed. The question is whether he'll attack the acquisition itself or attempt to undermine your leadership. Either way, we need to prepare. I've already filed additional documentation with the SEC, Rachel said. The share transfers are ironclad. He can't reverse the acquisition, but he might try to challenge your fitness to lead. On what grounds? I asked, the champagne's warmth spreading through my chest, bolstering my confidence. Lack of recent industry experience is the obvious angle, Xavier replied. He'll argue that your years away from finance make you unqualified to run a tech company. That's rich, considering he was running it into the ground, Rachel scoffed. It doesn't matter what's true, Xavier cautioned. Only what he can make. The board believe. You need to solidify your authority quickly. I nodded, mentally cataloging the allies I would need. William Chen, the CFO, had seemed relieved rather than hostile when I exposed the financial manipulations. The head of product development, Tara Okoye, had no particular loyalty to Morgan from what I'd gathered. The board itself seemed pragmatic rather than personally invested in Morgan's leadership. I need to clean house in marketing first, I said, thinking aloud. Vanessa Reynolds has no qualifications beyond her connection to Morgan. The department is bloated with unnecessary positions, while development is understaffed. Bold move, Rachel observed, starting with your husband's girlfriend. It's not personal, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. The department's budget increased 42% last year with no corresponding increase in client acquisition. It's simple business sense. Xavier smiled approvingly. That's exactly the approach to take. Every decision must be defensible on pure business grounds, no hint of personal vendetta. As the afternoon stretched into evening, we developed a strategy for my first 30 days as controlling shareholder. I would need to meet individually with key staff, review all current contracts, and develop a restructuring plan that would extend the company's runway while preserving its core intellectual assets. What about Morgan? I finally asked the question that had been hovering beneath our discussions. Xavier and Rachel exchanged glances. Professionally speaking, Xavier began carefully, retaining the founder through transition typically reassures clients and investors. But personally speaking, Rachel countered, keeping your cheating husband on payroll seems masochistic. I considered both perspectives, swirling the last of my champagne thoughtfully. I need to make that decision based on what's best for the company, not my feelings about our marriage. And what about your marriage? Elise asked gently. What happens there? The question landed heavily, cutting through the business-focused energy of our planning. What about my marriage? The institution that had slowly transformed me from Morgan's equal to his subordinate, from a respected professional to just a stay-at-home mom? I don't know yet, I admitted, one corporate takeover at a time. The evening concluded with handshakes and promises of support. As the sedan carried me toward the Four Seasons Hotel, Rachel's insistence that I needed neutral territory tonight seemed wise. I finally listened to Morgan's voicemails. The first was pure shock. "What the hell, Olivia? Call me immediately. This isn't funny." The second had progressed to anger. "You have no idea what you're doing. You'll destroy everything I've built. This childish revenge stunt needs to end now." The third, left nearly an hour after the board meeting, had escalated to threatening. "I've called my lawyer. You can't just waltz in and steal my company because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. We have a prenup, remember? You're going to regret this little power play." I deleted all three without responding and checked into the hotel, the luxurious suite feeling both decadent and necessary. After years of justifying every personal expense, of clipping coupons while Morgan spent lavishly on business dinners and gifts for Vanessa, I allowed myself this indulgence without guilt. Sinking into the plush hotel bathrobe after a long shower, I finally allowed the day's emotions to catch up with me. The triumph of the boardroom confrontation, the vindication of seeing respect dawn in Patricia Winter's eyes, the sheer relief of reclaiming my voice, all of it washed over me in waves. But beneath those feelings ran a current of sadness. For the marriage I had believed in, for the partner Morgan had once been, for the years spent diminishing myself to accommodate his ego. My phone chimed with a text from Kate. "Mom told me something big happened. You okay?" I smiled at my sister's typical directness. "Better than okay. Changed my life today. Tell you everything tomorrow." I was about to set the phone aside when it rang, Morgan again. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Olivia, finally." His voice instantly grated on my nerves with its familiar patronizing tone. "We need to talk about what happened today." "Yes, we do," I agreed calmly. "The board reconvenes at 9 tomorrow to discuss leadership transition." "Not about the company," he snapped. "About us. What were you thinking? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? In front of my entire staff?" "Our staff," I corrected him. And yes, I imagine it was humiliating to be exposed as both financially incompetent and unfaithful in the same meeting. Unfortunate timing. His sharp intake of breath carried clearly through the line. "This isn't you, Liv. You're not vindictive. Like this? You're right that it isn't me. Or rather, it isn't the version of me you've become comfortable controlling. But the real me? The Northwestern finance graduate who managed billions before stepping back to raise our family? She's always been here, Morgan. You just stopped seeing her. So this is punishment? For Vanessa?" The genuine confusion in his voice almost made me laugh. He truly couldn't conceive of my actions having any motivation beyond reaction to his affair. "Vanessa is a symptom, not the disease," I replied. "The disease was your growing contempt for me, your dismissal of my intelligence, your assumption that raising our children somehow diminished my capabilities. That's not fair. I've always supported you. When did you last ask my opinion about anything that mattered?" I interrupted. "When did you last share business concerns instead of hiding them? When did you last treat me as a partner rather than an employee managing your household?" The silence that followed confirmed what I already knew. He couldn't remember because it had been years. "The company is in trouble, Olivia," he finally said, his voice softening to the cajoling tone he used when trying to manipulate me. "I've been protecting you from that stress. This isn't a game. People's livelihoods are at stake, our family's security." "The company is indeed in trouble," I agreed, "which is why it needs new leadership. Leadership that doesn't spend company funds on extramarital affairs or manipulate financial reports to hide incompetence." "You can't run a tech company!" he exploded, the reasonable facade cracking. "You've been changing diapers and planning playdates for 12 years while the industry evolved. You'll destroy everything." There it was, the raw contempt beneath the surface, the belief that motherhood had rendered me incapable of complex thought or professional achievement. The board seems willing to take that chance, I replied evenly. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Morgan. Be prepared to discuss transition options, including whether you have a place in the company's future. I ended the call before he could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. Tomorrow would require all my focus, all my strength. Tonight, I needed rest. Sleep came surprisingly easily. The weight of secrets finally lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't lie awake cataloging Morgan's lies or questioning my own worth. Instead, I dreamed of boardrooms and balance sheets, of spreadsheets that told the truth instead of convenient fictions. I woke before my alarm, energized despite the emotional marathon of the previous day. After ordering room service, another small rebellion against years of careful household budgeting, I dressed in the second power suit I'd purchased for this purpose. This one, a deep navy with subtle pinstripes that projected both authority and approachability. My phone, when I turned it back on, had 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from Morgan, growing increasingly desperate as the night progressed. Several were from Vanessa Reynolds, alternating between pleading for her job and threatening legal action for character defamation. 3 were from William Chen, asking for a private meeting before the board convened. I responded only to William, agreeing to meet him at a coffee shop near Pendleton Tech headquarters at 8:15 a.m. If the CFO was reaching out independently, he might prove a valuable ally or reveal himself as Morgan's mole. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when I arrived, but William had secured a secluded corner table. He stood when he saw me approach, his typical accountant's reserve momentarily replaced by visible nervousness. "Mrs. Pendleton, thank you for meeting me," he began as we sat. "Olivia, please," I corrected him. "And thank you for reaching out. I imagine yesterday was unsettling for everyone." William nodded, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Unsettling is one word for it. Revolutionary might be another." He glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. "Mr. Pendleton called an emergency meeting of the executive team last night after you left. It didn't go well?" "I can imagine," I replied, keeping my expression neutral. "What happened?" "He tried to convince everyone that your acquisition was illegitimate, that you had somehow manipulated or falsified the share transfers." William shook his head. "When that didn't gain traction, he switched to claiming you were emotionally unstable and acting out of jealousy. So Morgan had chosen the undermining approach rather than challenging the acquisition itself. Predictable. And the team's reaction?" I asked, though I could guess from William's presence here. "Mixed. Some, particularly in marketing, seem loyal to him. Others..." He hesitated. "Are concerned about the financial discrepancies I highlighted," I finished for him. William nodded, relief crossing his features. "The projections you shared with the board yesterday matched my original calculations exactly. Calculations that Mr. Pendleton insisted I reconsider before presenting to investors." "You kept records of the originals," I observed. "Not a question." I did. William's spine straightened slightly. "I've been uncomfortable with the financial reporting for months, but challenging the CEO is career suicide," I supplied. "Especially when that CEO has a reputation for vindictiveness," William agreed. "Mrs. Olivia, I want you to know that I'm prepared to provide complete documentation of all the financial manipulations if necessary. The altered projections, the misclassified expenses, the shuffling of funds between accounts to create the appearance of liquidity. This was more than I could have hoped for, the CFO effectively turning state's witness against Morgan's financial misconduct. "I appreciate your integrity, William," I said sincerely. "The company needs that honesty now more than ever. What can you tell me about our immediate financial position?" For the next 30 minutes, William provided a candid assessment of Pendleton Tech's precarious situation, The company had approximately 6 weeks of payroll coverage remaining if nothing changed. 3 major clients were threatening to terminate contracts due to delayed deliverables. The development team was understaffed and demoralized, while marketing and sales had ballooned with unnecessary positions, many filled by Morgan's personal connections. "And the core technology?" I asked, zeroing in on what mattered most. "The intellectual property that gives the company its value?" "Still solid," William confirmed. "The adaptive learning algorithm is genuinely innovative. With proper development support and honest marketing, it could revolutionize how companies process customer data. The problem isn't the product, it's the management." "Thank you for your candor," I said as we prepared to leave for the board meeting. "I hope I can count on your continued honesty as we move forward." William nodded firmly. "It's a relief to finally work with someone who wants the actual numbers, not the convenient ones." We arrived at Pendleton Tech headquarters separately, a precaution against Morgan claiming collusion. The executive floor hummed with nervous energy, staff members speaking in hushed tones that abruptly ceased when they spotted me. News of yesterday's confrontation had clearly spread throughout the company, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. Patricia Winters was already seated in the boardroom, along with 3 other board members. She acknowledged me with a nod, significantly, warmer than any greeting she'd offered at company functions. "Mrs. Pendleton, good morning. We were just discussing yesterday's revelations." "Please call me Olivia," I replied, taking the seat at the head of the table, my seat now. "I hope you've had time to review the financial materials I provided." "We have," confirmed James Latimer, the most senior board member after Patricia. "Deeply concerning, to put it mildly. We've asked for Mr. Chen to join us momentarily to verify certain aspects." "Perfect." William would corroborate everything. The remaining board members arrived in quick succession, followed by William Chen and Rachel, who took her position as my counsel at the side of the room. Morgan was conspicuously absent as the clock ticked toward 9. At 9:07, the boardroom doors burst open. Morgan strode in, accompanied by a silver-haired man in an expensive suit whom I recognized as Harold Brennan, one of the city's most prominent corporate attorneys. Vanessa Reynolds hovered uncertainly in the doorway behind them until Morgan beckoned her in impatiently. "Good morning," I greeted them calmly. "Mr. Brennan, I wasn't aware you would be joining us. Ms. Reynolds, this is a board meeting, so unless you've been appointed to the board overnight." "Vanessa is here as my strategic advisor," Morgan declared, taking a seat directly opposite me. "And Harold is here to help clarify the legal irregularities surrounding yesterday's performance." Patricia Winters frowned. "What legal irregularities specifically?" Brennan cleared his throat. "It appears that Mrs. Pendleton may have used privileged information obtained through her marital relationship to orchestrate this acquisition, information that wasn't available to other potential investors. That raises serious questions about insider trading." Rachel straightened, stepping forward. "I'd be fascinated to hear what privileged information you believe my client accessed, Mr. Brennan. The financial reports she reviewed were all publicly filed with the SEC, though, as we now know, they were falsified to present a more favorable picture than reality. Additionally," I added, "any informal knowledge I gained as Morgan's spouse would fall under pillow talk, not insider trading. Unless Morgan was deliberately sharing confidential business information with his wife while excluding her from formal business discussions, which would be an interesting contradiction to explain." Morgan's face flushed. He clearly hadn't anticipated this line of defense. "The more pressing issue," Patricia Winters interjected, "is the financial condition of Pendleton Tech, which appears far more dire than this board was led to believe. Mr. Chen, would you care to comment on the discrepancies between the financial reports presented to us in the last quarter and those shared by Mrs. Pendleton yesterday?" William Chen straightened in his chair, glancing briefly at Morgan before answering. The reports presented to the board were modified from my original calculations at Mr. Pendleton's direction. The projections were artificially inflated, expenses were misclassified, and certain liabilities were omitted entirely. That's absurd, Morgan sputtered. I asked you to present the most optimistic scenario based on pending deals. You instructed me to alter the numbers, William corrected. Firmly. I have emails documenting those instructions, as well as the original spreadsheets with your comments requesting specific changes. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Harold Brennan shifted uncomfortably. If these allegations are true, James Latimer said slowly, we're not just discussing poor management. We're talking about deliberate misrepresentation to the board and potentially to investors. That enters different territory entirely. My client acknowledges that certain projections may have been optimistic, Brennan interjected smoothly. But that's hardly unusual in a growth-focused technology company. The more immediate concern is whether Mrs. Pendleton has the experience or expertise to lead a company in this sector. My client's qualifications include a finance degree from Northwestern, 3 years managing multi-billion-dollar portfolios at Goldman Sachs, and most recently, the successful acquisition of a technology company that more experienced players, including its own CEO, failed to recognize was undervalued despite its current cash flow challenges, Rachel countered. That was 15 years ago, Morgan dismissed. The industry has evolved dramatically since Olivia was a junior analyst. Principles of sound financial management haven't changed, I replied evenly. Neither has the importance of honest reporting, strategic resource allocation, or focusing on core business strengths, all areas where current leadership has demonstrably failed. Patricia Winters tapped her pen thoughtfully against her notepad. I think we need to address two separate issues. Here, first, the company's actual financial position and how to address it. Second, the leadership structure moving forward. She turned to William Chen. Mr. Chen, in your professional opinion, what immediate steps are needed to stabilize the company, financially? William didn't hesitate. We need to reduce overhead immediately, particularly in non-essential departments. We need to accelerate development of the core technology to meet contractual obligations with our major clients. And we need to be transparent with potential investors about our actual position rather than continuing to present falsified projections. And these steps weren't taken previously because, James Latimer prompted, because Mr. Pendleton insisted our financial challenges were temporary and would resolve once certain potential deals materialized, William replied carefully. Deals that never materialized. Morgan slammed his hand on the table. Those deals would have closed if I'd been given more time. You can't build a revolutionary company by pinching pennies and playing it safe. You can't build any company on lies and empty promises, I responded. The adaptive learning algorithm is genuinely valuable, but it's been consistently underfunded while marketing received budget increases that yielded no corresponding revenue growth. I turned to the board. I propose a 3-part immediate action plan. First, restructuring to reduce overhead by 30%, focusing cuts on non-technical departments. Second, reallocation of resources to accelerate development and meet client deliverables. Third, transparent communication with our remaining investors about the company's actual position and realistic path to profitability. You're going to gut the company, Morgan accused, fire half the staff and destroy morale. The staff already knows something is wrong, I countered. They see projects falling behind schedule, promises being broken, resources being misallocated. Honesty will improve morale, not damage it. Patricia Winters looked thoughtful. Mrs. Pendleton's approach seems sound from a business perspective. The question remains whether this board is comfortable with such a significant leadership change during a period of financial vulnerability. If I may, Rachel interjected, my client now controls 58% of Pendleton Tech's shares. While she values the board's input, the leadership decision ultimately rests with her as majority shareholder. Harold Brennan frowned. The board still has fiduciary responsibilities regardless of shareholding percentages. If they believe Mrs. Pendleton's leadership would damage the company's value. More than cooking the books and spending company. Funds on personal indulgences already has, Rachel challenged. The tension in the room was palpable. Morgan's expression had shifted from outrage to calculation. He was reassessing, looking for a new angle. Perhaps, he said slowly, we could consider a compromise. A co-leadership arrangement during transition. Olivia's financial perspective, combined with my industry experience and client relationships. There it was, the pivot I'd been expecting. When bullying failed, Morgan always switched to negotiation. An interesting suggestion, I replied, allowing a thoughtful pause. However, effective leadership requires trust. The financial misrepresentations Mr. Chen has documented demonstrate a fundamental breach of trust that cannot be easily repaired. I turned to address the full board. I'm not proposing to eliminate Morgan from the company entirely. His client relationships remain valuable. I'm proposing a restructured leadership where I serve as CEO, with Morgan transitioning to a business development role, provided he can demonstrate complete transparency moving forward. The offer hung in the air, generous on its face, humiliating in its reality. Morgan would be demoted within the company he founded, reporting to the wife he had dismissed and betrayed. That's outrageous, Vanessa finally spoke, her voice tight with indignation. Morgan built this company from nothing. You can't just swoop in and demote him to a sales position. Business development is hardly just sales, I corrected mildly. And I'm offering this accommodation purely in recognition of his founding role and client relationships. Given the financial improprieties documented, termination would be equally justifiable. Patricia Winters cleared her throat. I believe Mrs. Pendleton's proposal merits serious consideration. It acknowledges Mr. Pendleton's historical contribution while addressing the clear need for new financial leadership. This is insane, Morgan muttered, turning to Harold Brennan. They can't do this. Legally, Mr. Pendleton, they can, Brennan replied quietly. With majority shareholding and documentation of financial misrepresentation, Mrs. Pendleton's position is unfortunately strong. The realization of his powerlessness seemed to hit Morgan physically. He slumped slightly in his chair, the fight, visibly draining from him as he confronted the new reality, a reality where he was no longer in control. The board needs to deliberate on these matters, Patricia announced. I suggest we take a brief recess. As the board members filed out, Morgan remained seated, staring at the table with a mixture of disbelief and rage. Vanessa hovered uncertainly, beside him, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture that seemed more proprietary than comforting. You won't get away with this, she hissed at me when the board members were out of earshot. You're destroying him out of petty jealousy. I gathered. My papers calmly, meeting her gaze directly. Ms. Reynolds, I understand you're concerned about your position, both professionally and personally. Let me be clear. Morgan's infidelity is the least of my concerns right now. The company's survival is my priority. Your department's performance, metrics, and your qualifications for your role will be evaluated by the same standard as everyone else's. I stood to leave, then paused, unable to resist one parting observation. Though I would suggest updating your resume. The marketing division will be significantly downsized by the end of the week. As I walked out of the boardroom, leaving Morgan and Vanessa in stunned silence, I felt a surging clarity about the path forward. For the company, for my career, and for my life beyond the shadow of the man who had underestimated me for far too long. The board deliberations lasted nearly 2 hours. I spent the time in Patricia Winters' private office, reviewing financial documents William Chen had quietly provided, detailed evidence of Morgan's mismanagement that painted an even bleaker picture than I'd initially realized. Rachel worked from her laptop in the corner, occasionally offering legal perspectives as I sorted through the financial carnage. "He's been funding a phantom office in Chicago," I murmured, scanning a particularly troubling expense report. "Lease payments for space that doesn't appear to be used by anyone actually working for Pendleton." Rachel glanced up. "Money laundering? Or a convenient place to meet Vanessa away from the office," I replied, noting the charges aligned with Morgan's supposed business trips. "Either way, it's at least $18,000 a month the company can't afford." A soft knock interrupted our analysis. William Chen entered, his expression carefully neutral. "The board is reconvening. They've reached a decision." "Thank you," I replied, gathering the scattered financial documents. "You've been tremendously helpful, William. Whatever happens next, I won't forget it." He nodded once, professional, but with a hint of what might have been relief in his eyes. "It's been liberating to finally share the actual financial situation with someone who wants to hear it." The boardroom had transformed in my absence. The tension remained, but its nature had shifted. Morgan sat stiffly at the far end of the table, Vanessa notably absent. Harold Brennan was still present, but his posture suggested resignation rather than combative legal strategy. The board members watched my entrance with expressions ranging from cautious respect to outright curiosity. "Patricia." Winters waited until I was seated before speaking. "After careful consideration of the financial evidence and thorough discussion of the company's precarious position, this board has reached a unanimous decision regarding leadership structure." I kept my expression carefully neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Unanimous was unexpected. I'd anticipated at least some resistance from board members with long-standing loyalty to Morgan. "We have approved your proposed restructuring plan, including your appointment as chief executive officer, effective immediately," Patricia continued. "We believe Pendleton Tech requires decisive action to address its financial challenges, and your analysis aligns with our assessment of what's needed." I allowed myself a small nod of acknowledgement, not yet ready to celebrate what was clearly only the first part of their decision. "Regarding Mr. Pendleton's continued role," Patricia continued, glancing briefly toward Morgan, "we agree that his institutional knowledge and client relationships remain valuable assets. However, we have modified your proposal slightly." Here it came, the compromise I'd expected. Rather than a business development position reporting directly to you, which we believe would create unnecessary tension during transition, we propose creating a temporary Chief Client Relations Officer role for Mr. Pendleton. He would report to the board for a period of 90 days while assisting with client retention during leadership transition. After that period, his performance and continued role would be reevaluated. It was an elegant solution. The board was diplomatically acknowledging the impossibility of Morgan reporting directly to me while still placing him in a subordinate role. The temporary designation and 90-day review period made it clear that his long-term future with the company remained precarious. "That seems reasonable," I agreed, watching Morgan's face for reaction. His expression remained rigidly controlled, but a muscle twitched along his jawline. The tell I'd learned meant he was suppressing rage. His lawyer placed a warning hand on his arm as Morgan opened his mouth to object. "My client accepts these terms," Brennan interjected smoothly before Morgan could speak, "though he reserves the right to review his position after the 90-day transition period." "Of course," Patricia nodded. "We anticipate everyone will have clearer perspective after the initial restructuring phase." She turned back to me. "Mrs. Pendleton, or should I say CEO Pendleton, the board requests a comprehensive stabilization plan within 7 days, including specific cost-cutting measures and revenue generation strategies." "You'll have it in 5, I promised, along with a complete reassessment of current staff positions and departmental budgets." James Latimer spoke for the first time. "We understand significant downsizing may be necessary given the financial situation. The board requests any major staffing changes be reviewed with us before implementation. Absolutely, I agreed. Transparency with the board will be my highest priority, a marked departure from previous leadership practices. Morgan's hand tightened into a fist on the table, but Brennan's warning squeeze on his shoulder kept him silent. Patricia stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. We'll issue a company-wide announcement this afternoon regarding the leadership change. In the meantime, Mrs. Pendleton, perhaps you'd like to address the executive team? I'll do that immediately, I confirmed, gathering my materials. William Chen and I will need access to all financial records and executive communications to begin stabilization planning. You can't just rifle through confidential communications. Morgan finally broke his silence, voice tight with barely controlled anger. As CEO, I now have full access rights to all company communications sent. Through official channels, I reminded him. Unless there's something specific you're concerned about me finding? He didn't answer, but the flush creeping up his neck told me everything. There would be more damning evidence in those communications, perhaps evidence of deliberate financial misconduct beyond what we already knew. This meeting is adjourned, Patricia announced, ending the confrontation before it could escalate. Mrs. Pendleton, my office is available for your use until proper arrangements can be made. The board members filed out, several nodding respectfully, in my direction. Morgan remained seated, staring at the table as Harold Brennan gathered their materials. We should discuss arrangements at home, Morgan said stiffly when only Rachel and I remained with him and his attorney. My assistant will deliver your personal items from the office to a hotel of your choosing, I replied evenly. I think separate accommodations are appropriate for now, don't you? His head snapped up. You're throwing me out of my own house? I'm suggesting we need space during this transition, I corrected him. Given your relationship with Vanessa, I assumed you'd already have alternative arrangements. The direct reference to his affair made him flinch. This isn't over, Olivia. On the contrary, I replied, gathering my briefcase. It's very much over, both professionally and personally. The only remaining question is whether you can adapt to that reality with sufficient grace to salvage something from the wreckage. Rachel followed me out, waiting until we were alone in the hallway before letting out a low whistle. That was masterful. The board completely backed your play. They're pragmatists, I replied. The company is in crisis, and I offered a viable solution coupled with controlling share ownership. Their personal feelings about me or Morgan are secondary to their fiduciary responsibilities. Still, it couldn't have gone better, Rachel insisted. Now comes the hard part, actually saving this sinking ship. I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I'll need a temporary office set up immediately, and I need to address the executive team before rumors start flying. Already arranged. Rachel gestured toward Patricia's office. The executives are gathering in the main conference room. Word travels fast. They know something major happened with the board. What about the kids? I suddenly remembered. Maternal responsibility momentarily overriding corporate concerns. I should call my mother. Already taken care of, Rachel assured me. I texted Kate this morning. She's coordinating with your mom for another overnight with the kids. You need to focus here right now. I squeezed her arm gratefully. Thank you. For everything. Just doing my job, she replied with a smile. Now go do yours, CEO Pendleton. The executive conference room fell silent as I entered, 7 anxious faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright dread. William Chen sat slightly apart, the only one who already knew what was coming. Thank you all for gathering on short notice, I began, taking the seat at the head of the table that had previously been Morgan's exclusive domain. As you may have guessed, significant changes are happening at Pendleton Tech, beginning with leadership. I paused, letting the moment breathe, establishing my authority with deliberate calm. Effective immediately, I am assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer. Morgan Pendleton will be transitioning to a temporary position as Chief Client Relations Officer, reporting directly to the board. The reactions were immediate and varied. Jason Reynolds, Chief Marketing Officer and Vanessa's direct supervisor, blanched visibly. Tara Okoye, Head of Product Development, failed to suppress a smile. The others maintained carefully neutral expressions, professional masks hiding whatever they truly felt about this seismic shift. These changes come in response to serious financial challenges that have been obscured from both the board and most of you, I continued. Pendleton Tech is in a precarious position, with approximately 6 weeks of operating capital remaining if drastic measures aren't taken immediately. That got their attention. Even those who had maintained poker faces now showed alarm. "That can't be right," Jason protested. "Last quarter's reports showed 12 months of runway at current burn rates." "Those reports were manipulated," William I. Chen stated flatly. "The actual financial position is significantly worse than what was presented." The accusation hung in the air, its implications settling over the room like a heavy fog. "I've been authorized by the board to implement immediate stabilization measures," I continued, pulling their focus back to the path forward rather than the missteps of the past. "These will include significant budget reductions, possible staffing, adjustments, and a comprehensive review of all current projects to prioritize those with the clearest path to revenue generation." "Are we talking layoffs?" asked Michael Torres, the head of human resources, his expression grim. "That's very likely," I confirmed, seeing no benefit in sugarcoating reality. "The specifics will depend on the department-by-department assessment we'll be conducting over the next 72 hours. What I can tell you is that every decision will be based on financial necessity and strategic value to the company's core technology, not on personal relationships or historical hierarchies." The pointed reference to merit-based evaluations wasn't lost on anyone, particularly Jason Reynolds, whose marketing department was staffed largely with Morgan's friends and connections. "I'll be meeting with each of you individually tomorrow to better understand your departments and hear your recommendations," I continued. "In the meantime, I ask that you maintain normal operations and refrain from speculation with your teams. A company-wide announcement will be distributed this afternoon." "And Morgan? Mr. Pendleton?" Jason ventured. "Will he be involved in these evaluations?" "Mr. Pendleton will be focusing exclusively on client relationship management during this transition," I replied evenly. "All operational decisions now fall under my authority as CEO." I ended the meeting after addressing a few additional questions, asking William Chen to remain behind. The others filed out, already forming whispered alliances and theories in the hallway beyond. "That went better than expected," William observed when we were alone. "It's early days," I cautioned. "The real test will come when we start making specific cuts. I'll need comprehensive departmental budgets and staffing reports by tomorrow morning." "Already prepared," William nodded toward his laptop. "I've been maintaining shadow records of the actual financials for months. I can show you exactly where the bloat is worst." "Perfect. Let's get started." I moved around the table to sit beside him, ready to dive into the detailed work of financial triage. For the next 6 hours, William and I dissected Pendleton Tech's true financial state, department by department, line item by line item. The picture that emerged was simultaneously worse than I'd feared and more salvageable than I'd hoped. The core technology, an adaptive learning algorithm for customer data analysis, remained genuinely valuable and ahead of competitors. The development team, though understaffed and demoralized, included several brilliant engineers whose work was the company's true asset. The financial problems stemmed primarily from excessive spending in non-technical areas, particularly marketing and executive perks, combined with an ill-advised expansion into tangential product lines that had diverted resources from the core technology. "If we cut these 3 auxiliary projects," William suggested, highlighting sections of the budget spreadsheet, We could reallocate those developers to the main platform and potentially meet the delivery deadlines for Axiom Corp and Neurotech. I studied the numbers. Those 2 contracts alone would extend our runway by nearly 4 months if we deliver on schedule. Do we have the technical capacity to meet those deadlines with the current team? Not without the reassigned developers, William admitted, and even then, it would require focused effort with no distractions. Which means cutting administrative overhead to shield the technical team from disruption, I concluded, starting with marketing. William nodded grimly. Marketing's budget increased 68% year over year with no corresponding increase in qualified leads or client acquisition. It's the most obvious target. By 7 p.m., we had outlined a preliminary stabilization plan that would extend Pendleton Tech's runway from 6 weeks to nearly 6 months, enough time to rebuild client confidence and pursue additional funding if necessary. The plan required eliminating approximately 30% of current positions, with the cuts concentrated in marketing, sales support, and administrative departments. We should bring HR into this conversation before finalizing the staffing cuts, I decided, rubbing my tired eyes. Michael Torres seemed level-headed in the executive meeting. Torres is solid, William agreed. One of the few who questioned Morgan's decisions, though quietly. He's been here since near the beginning. Set up a meeting with him first thing tomorrow, I instructed, gathering my notes. And one other thing. I need a complete audit of Morgan's expenses for the past 2 years. Personal charges, travel, entertaining, everything. William hesitated briefly. That may uncover uncomfortable information. I'm counting on it, I replied. I need to understand the full extent of his financial mismanagement, including any potential misappropriation of company funds. As we wrapped up our marathon strategy session, my phone vibrated with a text from Kate. Kids asking when you're coming home. What should I tell them? Reality crashed back. I had children waiting for explanations I wasn't sure how to provide. How did one explain to a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old that their mother had secretly bought their father's company and taken his job? I need to go, I told William, suddenly feeling the weight of my dual roles. Can you email me those? Departmental breakdowns tonight? Already done, he assured me. Everything's in your new company email account. The IT team set it up this afternoon. I gathered my things, shifting mental gears from CEO back to mother. Thank you, William. Your integrity probably saved this company. He shrugged, uncomfortable, with the praise. I just did what I should have done months ago. You gave me the opportunity to fix it. The drive to my mother's house gave me time to consider how to approach the inevitable conversation with my children. They adored their father, despite his increasingly frequent absences and distraction. How would they process this radical change in our family dynamic? Mom opened the door before I could knock, enveloping me in a fierce hug. There she is, she announced, pulling back to study my face. The corporate raider herself. Mom? I protested weakly. That's not exactly... Kate told me everything, she interrupted, pulling me inside. About time someone put that husband of yours in his place. Though buying his company was perhaps a touch dramatic. I couldn't help laughing at her characterization. Says the woman who once had Dad's vintage Corvette towed from his office parking lot when he forgot your anniversary. Effective communication is a family trait, she winked. The kids are in the den with Kate. They know something's happening, but not specifics. Kate looked up from the board game she was playing with Emma and Aiden when I entered the den. Her raised eyebrow silently asked, "How did it go?" I gave a small nod that said, "As planned," then knelt beside my children, drinking in their familiar, beloved faces. "Mom!" Aiden launched himself into my arms. "Are you done with your important meeting? Can we go home now?" Emma, at 13, already more perceptive, studied me with cautious eyes. "Something's different," she observed quietly. "You look different." I sat cross-legged on the floor beside them, choosing my words carefully. I do have something important to tell you. Both. There are going to be some changes at home and with Dad's, with our work situations. Are you getting a job? Aiden asked, his forehead crinkling in confusion. But who will pick us up from school? Actually, I did get a job, I confirmed, smiling at his practical concern. A pretty big one, in fact. I'm going to be running Dad's company now. Emma's eyes widened. Wait, what? You're going to be Dad's boss? The directness of her question momentarily threw me. It's complicated, sweetie. Dad will still work with the company's clients, but I'll be making the business decisions now. Does Dad know? Emma pressed, always quick to identify the emotional undercurrents. He does, I confirmed. He's adjusting to the idea. Is that why he hasn't called us today? She continued, her perceptiveness both impressive and heartbreaking. Is he mad? I took a deep breath. Your father is dealing with a lot of changes right now. He loves you both very much, and nothing about work will change that. But yes, he's probably feeling upset about the work situation. And about Vanessa? Emma asked, dropping the question like a small bomb in the middle of our conversation. The room went still. Kate froze mid-move in the board game. My mother made a small sound of surprise from the doorway. What do you know about Vanessa? I asked carefully, fighting to keep my voice neutral. Emma shrugged with forced casualness that couldn't quite mask her hurt. I'm not a baby, Mom. Dad's been bringing her to his weekend office visits when you think we're at soccer practice. She's always touching his arm and laughing super loud at everything he says. My heart constricted painfully. Of course, Emma had noticed. She noticed everything. I've met her too, Aiden added quietly. She gave me candy and said I looked just like Daddy. The revelation that Morgan had been introducing our children to his mistress without my knowledge sparked a fresh wave of anger that I struggled to contain. This wasn't the time to let my own emotions color their understanding. Vanessa works with Dad, I said carefully. Or she did. There will be some changes there too. Are you and Dad getting divorced? Emma asked bluntly. Kate winced at the directness, but I appreciated my daughter's courage in voicing the question that was clearly weighing on her. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Right now, Dad and I are taking some time apart while we figure things out. He'll be staying somewhere else for a while, but he'll still see you both regularly. Aiden's lower lip trembled. But who's going to help me with my science project? Dad promised. I gathered him into my arms, his small body fitting against mine as it had since infancy. I'll help you with your science project. Or we can ask Dad when he sees you this weekend. This isn't about you or Emma. This is adult stuff that Dad and I need to work through. Because of Vanessa? Emma pressed, her expression far too knowing for 13. Because of many things, I corrected gently. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt each other, and then they need to figure out if they can fix things or if they need to make different arrangements. Like you taking Dad's company? Emma challenged, a flash of anger crossing her features. I recognized the protective instinct behind her question. Despite everything, Morgan was still her beloved father. The company was in trouble, I explained, simplifying enormously. Dad made some mistakes that were going to hurt a lot of people who work there. I found a way to help fix those mistakes, which meant making some big changes. Emma studied me for a long moment, her young face carrying too much understanding. Dad's not going to like that. No, I agreed softly. He doesn't. But sometimes doing the right thing isn't the same as doing the easy thing. Like when you made me apologize to Zoe even though she started it, Aiden volunteered, making connections in his 10-year-old way. I smiled, grateful for his simple perspective. Something like that, buddy. Now how about we head home? It's getting late, and you both have school tomorrow. Will Dad be there? Emma asked, the the vulnerability beneath her question painfully clear. "Not tonight," I answered honestly. "But he'll call you tomorrow and we'll work out times for him to see you both regularly." The drive home was quieter than usual, both children lost in their own thoughts about the seismic changes reshaping their world. When we arrived, the house felt different somehow, as if the very atmosphere had shifted with the power dynamics of our family. I tucked Aiden in first, answering his practical questions about lunches and school pickups with reassurances that our daily routine would remain largely unchanged. "I'll still be here in the mornings and Grandma will help with afternoon pickups on days when I have late meetings," I promised. "And you can always call me if you need anything." Emma proved more challenging, her emotions more complex than her brother's. "You don't have to pretend you're sad about Dad leaving," she said as I sat on the edge of her bed. "I know what he did was wrong." I chose my words carefully, conscious of the fine line between honesty and overburdening her with adult concerns. "Your father made choices I don't agree with, both personally and professionally. But that doesn't change the fact that he loves you and Aiden very much." "But you don't love him anymore," she observed, her perceptiveness as uncomfortable as it was accurate. Did I still love Morgan? The question caught me off guard. The passionate love we'd once shared had gradually eroded, replaced by habit and convenience, long before I discovered his infidelity or financial misdeeds. "I'll always care about your dad because he gave me you and Aiden," I finally answered. "But sometimes relationships change, and right now, I need to focus on making sure you both feel secure and loved while I fix the problems at the company." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty, if not the situation itself. "I'm glad you're not just sad," she said quietly. "Lizzie's mom just cried all the time when her dad left." I hugged her tightly, marveling at her resilience. "I might still have some sad moments," I admitted, "but I'm also excited about what comes next. Change can be scary, but it can also be the beginning of something better." After both children were asleep, I finally allowed myself to fully process the day's events. In less than 24 hours, I had transformed from Morgan's underestimated wife to his boss, from a stay-at-home mom to the CEO of a technology company in crisis. The professional challenges ahead were daunting. Staff cuts to implement, client relationships to salvage, financial holes to plug. But as I sat in the quiet kitchen that had once been the center of my carefully constructed domestic life, I realized the personal transformation might be even more profound. For years, I had gradually diminished myself to accommodate Morgan's ego, to fit the role of supportive wife and mother while suppressing my own ambitions and intelligence. That version of Olivia was gone now, replaced by someone I was still getting to know. Someone who moved through boardrooms with authority, who made difficult decisions without apology, who refused to be underestimated any longer. My phone chimed, with a text from Morgan. "We need to talk about the kids and us." I studied the message, noting his strategic mention of the children first, always his opening move when he wanted something. The old Olivia would have responded immediately, eager to smooth over conflict, to accommodate his schedule, to make things easier for everyone but herself. The new CEO of Pendleton Tech considered her priorities more carefully. Tomorrow would bring departmental reviews, difficult conversations with staff whose positions might be eliminated, strategic planning for the company's survival. The children were safe in processing the changes as well as could be expected. Morgan's desire to talk could wait. I set the phone aside without responding and opened my laptop instead, reviewing the departmental budgets William had sent. There would be time for personal negotiations later, after I'd ensured the company's survival and solidified my position as its new leader. The first cuts would come tomorrow, starting with the bloated marketing department and its unqualified director. Vanessa Reynolds would learn just how expensive an affair with the CEO could be, especially when that CEO was replaced by his supposedly clueless wife. My first official day as CEO began at 5:30 a.m., long before the children stirred. I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop, reviewing the layoff recommendations William and I had finalized the previous night. 38 positions would be eliminated, nearly a quarter of Pendleton Tech's total workforce. The necessary cuts concentrated in marketing, administration, and the failed auxiliary product lines Morgan had insisted on pursuing despite poor market response. Most painful were the 6 developers who had spent months working on Morgan's pet projects rather than the core technology. Talented people who would lose their jobs not through any fault of their own, but because of misguided leadership that had diverted their skills toward unprofitable ventures. The coffee maker gurgled in the background, its familiar sound at odds with the gravity of decisions I was making. For each name on the list, I reviewed performance evaluations, project contributions, and salary data. Each represented not just a budget line, but a person with rent or mortgages, possibly families, all of whom would be impacted by today's decisions. "You're up early," Emma observed, padding into the kitchen in fuzzy slippers, her hair still tangled from sleep. "CEO hours already?" I smiled at her gentle teasing, grateful that she seemed to be adjusting to our new reality. Something like, "That. Did you sleep okay?" She shrugged, opening the refrigerator. "Weird dreams. Dad kept turning into a dragon and flying away with the house." "That's remarkably on-point symbolism for a 13-year-old subconscious," I observed, closing my laptop. Emma poured herself orange juice, studying me over the rim of her glass. "Did he call you last night, after we went to bed?" "He texted." I acknowledged, unwilling to lie but careful about sharing details that might burden her. "We'll talk soon, but first I have some difficult work decisions to make today." "Are you firing people?" she asked directly, her perception unnervingly acute. I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Some positions at the company aren't necessary, and we need to reduce expenses to keep the business healthy. So yes, some people will lose their jobs today. Like Vanessa? The hint of vindictive hope in her voice reminded me that despite her maturity, Emma was still processing her father's betrayal through a child's lens. "The decisions are based on business needs, not personal feelings," I replied carefully, neither confirming nor denying Vanessa's fate specifically. "But departments are evaluated based on their performance and contribution to the company, and marketing hasn't been performing well." Emma seemed satisfied with this diplomatic answer. "Is Dad coming to my recital on Thursday?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "I don't know, sweetie. I haven't discussed scheduling with him yet, but I'm sure he'll want to be there." She nodded, but the skepticism in her eyes suggested she wasn't convinced. "It's okay if he doesn't. You'll be there, right?" "Absolutely," I promised, feeling the weight of my dual responsibilities as CEO and mother pressing on me. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. By the time I dropped the children at school and arrived at Pendleton Tech, Michael Torres from Human Resources was waiting in my temporary office, his expression grave. "The termination paperwork is ready for review," he began without preamble. "Severance packages, as we discussed, continuation of health benefits for 90 days, and outplacement services for all affected employees." I nodded, appreciating his directness. "Thank you, Michael. I know this isn't pleasant for anyone, especially you." He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I've been through layoffs before, but never at this scale. The company announcement about your appointment went out last night, so people are already anxious. Adding staff cuts immediately after a leadership change creates uncertainty and fear," I finished for him. "I understand, but delaying would only prolong the anxiety. Better to make the necessary cuts quickly and let the remaining team refocus on saving the core business." "Agreed," he conceded. "We're scheduled to begin the individual meetings at 10. Security has been briefed on protocols for escorting terminated employees from the building. Discreetly, of course." I frowned at this standard corporate practice. No security escorts unless absolutely necessary. These are professionals losing their jobs through no fault of their own. They deserve dignity in the process. Michael looked surprised, but nodded. That's a refreshing approach. I'll adjust the protocol. He hesitated before continuing. There's another matter we should discuss. Morgan has requested access to his former office to retrieve personal items. Supervised access only, I replied immediately. And after hours when fewer staff will be present. I don't want to create a spectacle. Understood. One last thing. Michael seemed suddenly uncomfortable. Vanessa Reynolds has been quite vocal about her relationship with Morgan. She's suggesting that her termination would constitute retaliation related to that relationship. I had anticipated this complication. Her termination is based entirely on performance metrics and departmental restructuring. The marketing department's budget increased 68% year over year, with no corresponding increase in client acquisition or revenue. The data speaks for itself. Michael relaxed visibly. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Documentation of performance issues makes this much cleaner legally. You'll have everything you need, I assured him. William Chen is preparing comprehensive financial analyses of each department's performance relative to budget. The numbers for marketing are particularly damning. As Michael left to finalize the termination procedures, I turned my attention to the stack of reports William had compiled on my desk. The forensic accounting painted a stark picture of Morgan's financial mismanagement. Not just poor business decisions, but potentially actionable misappropriation of company funds. The Chicago office was just the beginning. There were unexplained cash withdrawals, first-class travel to destinations where Pendleton Tech had no clients or prospects, luxury accommodations far beyond standard business requirements, and executive retreats that coincided suspiciously with Vanessa's social media posts from the same locations. A knock at my door interrupted my review. William Chen entered, carrying a fresh stack of documents and looking like he hadn't slept. "You've been busy," I observed, gesturing to the additional materials. He nodded grimly. "I found something you need to see immediately." He placed a folder on my desk, opening it to reveal bank statements and transfer records. Morgan has been siphoning development funds into a separate entity called Horizon Dynamics. It's registered in Wyoming with minimal disclosure requirements, but I managed to trace the ownership. "Let me guess," I said, already seeing where this was heading. "Morgan is the primary owner?" William shook his head. "That would be too obvious. The company is registered to Vanessa Reynolds, with Morgan listed as a consultant receiving substantial fees." I studied the documents, the implications immediately clear. They were setting up a parallel company using Pendleton's resources and intellectual property. "It appears so," William confirmed. "I found email exchanges discussing the transition of certain clients and developers to the new entity. Based on the timeline, they were planning to execute this within the next 60 days, precisely when Pendleton would have run out of operating capital. The calculated betrayal took my breath away. This wasn't just mismanagement or an affair, it was a deliberate plan to hollow out Pendleton Tech, leaving its empty shell to collapse while Morgan and Vanessa walked away with its most valuable assets and clients. "Does the board know about this?" I asked, already mentally revising the day's priorities. "Not yet. I discovered it late last night and wanted to bring it directly to you first." I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. "This changes things. We need to secure all intellectual property immediately and review all development repositories and code access. And we need to notify the board before Morgan attempts to contact them with his version of events." William nodded. "I've already asked IT to audit access credentials and lock down the development servers as part of the leadership transition protocol. No one's credentials have been revoked yet, but we're tracking all access attempts." "Good thinking," I acknowledged. "Set up an emergency board call for noon. These documents need to be presented immediately." and add Vanessa to the first round of terminations. Not last as we'd planned. I want her credentials revoked before she leaves the building. The morning unfolded with grim efficiency. At 10 o'clock, the phase notifications began. Department heads delivered the news to affected employees, accompanied by HR representatives who explained severance packages and transition support. I made myself visible, walking the floors and available to answer questions directly. An approach Morgan would never have considered, preferring to hide in his office during difficult times. The marketing department notifications were scheduled for 11:30, strategically timed just before the emergency board call. I chose to handle Vanessa's termination personally, with Michael Torres present for HR documentation. She was waiting when I entered the small conference room, her perfect posture and immaculate appearance betraying no hint of anxiety. Only the rapid tapping of her manicured nails on the table suggested her awareness that something was amiss. "Olivia," she greeted me with forced casualness. "This all seems very dramatic. Surely we could have discussed departmental restructuring in a less formal setting." "Ms. Reynolds," I replied, keeping my tone professionally neutral as Michael closed the door behind us. "This meeting isn't about departmental restructuring. It's about your immediate termination from Pendleton Tech." Her smile faltered, uncertainty flashing briefly across her carefully composed features. "That's absurd. I'm the director of marketing. Morgan would never—" "Morgan is no longer CEO," I reminded her calmly. "And this decision isn't based on personal considerations, but on documented performance issues, and more recently, evidence of actions directly harmful to Pendleton Tech's interests." Michael slid a folder across the table, containing performance metrics for the marketing department under her leadership. The department has consistently underperformed relative to budget, with client acquisition costs increasing 78% year over year, while new client signings decreased by 23%. Vanessa didn't even glance at the documents. "This is personal retaliation, and you know it. My relationship with Morgan has nothing to do with the company." "Your relationship with Morgan is indeed irrelevant to this decision," I agreed. "However, your role in establishing Horizon Dynamics as a vehicle to misappropriate Pendleton Tech's intellectual property and clients is highly relevant." The color drained from her face, her practiced poise cracking visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened a second folder, revealing the banking records William had discovered. Horizon Dynamics, registered in Wyoming with you listed as primary owner and Morgan as a paid consultant. The company that has received over $420,000 in diverted Pendleton Tech funds over the past 6 months. Michael looked genuinely shocked. I hadn't had time to brief him on this latest discovery. "Business diversification," Vanessa attempted, but her voice lacked conviction. Morgan was exploring alternative structures to protect Pendleton's assets. "By secretly transferring company funds to an entity he doesn't officially control?" I asked skeptically. "That's an interesting interpretation of fiduciary responsibility." She switched tactics, leaning forward with newfound intensity. "Look, Olivia, I understand you're hurt by what happened between Morgan and me. That's natural. But destroying the company to get revenge hurts everyone, including your children. Why not let Morgan buy back control? He has investors lined up who see the company's true potential." The manipulative approach was so transparent it almost made me laugh. "Ms. Reynolds, let me be very clear. My personal feelings about your relationship with my husband have absolutely no bearing on business decisions affecting Pendleton Tech. Your termination is based entirely on documented performance issues and evidence of potentially criminal misappropriation of company resources." I slid a termination agreement across the table. "Your employment ends effective immediately. This document outlines your severance package, which is generous considering the circumstances. Your company accounts and access credentials have already been suspended. You'll be escorted to collect personal belongings from your office, after which you'll need to leave the premises." "You can't do this," she insisted, Though her voice had lost its confident edge, Morgan won't allow it. Morgan no longer has authority to prevent it, I reminded her, and the board will be fully briefed on Horizon dynamics within the hour. I suggest you consult with an attorney before speaking further about this matter to anyone. Her facade finally cracked completely. You think you've won, don't you? Playing the wronged wife who suddenly becomes business genius? This company was circling the drain before you ever showed up. Morgan and I had a plan to salvage what was actually valuable. By stealing it, I clarified. That's not salvage, it's theft. And as for winning, this isn't a competition, Ms. Reynolds. It's a business in crisis that I'm now responsible for saving, despite the considerable damage you and Morgan have done to it. You're making a mistake, she hissed, standing abruptly. Morgan has connections you can't even imagine. People who won't do business with some housewife playing CEO. I remained seated, maintaining my composure. Actually, I'm a Northwestern finance graduate and former Goldman Sachs analyst who happens to be a mother. The housewife playing CEO narrative might have worked for Morgan when he was dismissing my input at home. But it won't work in a boardroom where I've just exposed financial fraud that occurred under your watch. Michael stepped forward, professional but firm. I'll escort you to your office now, Ms. Reynolds. As they left, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Not because of any personal victory over Vanessa, she was ultimately just another symptom of Morgan's ethical failures, but because I had maintained my professional composure throughout an encounter that could easily have devolved into the personal confrontation she clearly expected. The emergency board call began precisely at noon. Patricia Winters and the other board members listened in stunned silence as William and I presented the evidence of Horizon dynamics and the apparent conspiracy to strip Pendleton Tech of its valuable assets. This goes beyond poor management, James Latimer observed when we finished. This appears to be deliberate corporate theft. We should consider legal action, another board member suggested. Criminal charges may be appropriate. Patricia held up a hand, her expression grave. Before we proceed down that path, we need to consider the implications for Pendleton Tech. A public legal battle involving criminal charges against the founder would devastate whatever client confidence remains and potentially sink the company completely. And not to mention the impact on his children, I added quietly, keeping my personal concerns separate from business considerations, but unable to ignore them entirely. What do you recommend, Olivia? Patricia asked, the use of my first name, signaling a shift in our professional relationship. My priority is stabilizing Pendleton Tech and protecting its remaining assets, I replied carefully. I believe we should engage outside counsel to evaluate our legal options, but proceed cautiously with any public actions. In the meantime, we need to secure all intellectual property, reassure key clients, and accelerate development of the core technology. And Morgan's status? James Latimer inquired. The board approved his temporary position yesterday, but that was before this new information came to light. I considered the question thoughtfully. Removing Morgan entirely would alarm clients who have long-standing relationships with him. However, I no longer believe he can function even in the limited role we outlined. I recommend placing him on administrative leave immediately while we assess the full extent of the Horizon dynamics situation. The board unanimously approved this approach, along with engaging a specialized forensic accounting firm to thoroughly investigate all financial irregularities. We concluded with agreement to reconvene in 48 hours after the immediate crisis management steps had been implemented. As the call ended, William gave me a look of genuine respect. That was impressively measured. Many CEOs would have pushed for immediate legal action against someone who tried to steal their company. Revenge might be emotionally satisfying, but it rarely serves long-term business interests, I replied, gathering my notes. Besides, Morgan is still my children's father. They shouldn't have to see him led away in handcuffs if there's an alternative approach that still protects the company. William nodded thoughtfully. The staff reductions have been completed. 38 employees in total, including 9 from marketing. The mood is somber, but not panicked. Your visibility on the floors helped. People appreciate a leader who doesn't hide during difficult times. How are the development teams responding? I asked, focusing on what mattered most for the company's survival. Cautiously optimistic. Several have already expressed relief that the auxiliary projects are being shelved in favor of focusing on the core technology. Tara Okoye asked to meet with you. She has ideas for accelerating the Axiom deliverables. Schedule her for this afternoon, I instructed, and set up a town hall for tomorrow morning. The remaining staff deserves transparency about our situation and the path forward. The operations of the day continued in a blur of meetings, decisions, and crisis management. By 6 o'clock, when I finally had a moment to check my personal phone, I found 17 missed calls and messages, most from Morgan, whose tone had evolved from demanding to pleading as the day progressed, and news of the Horizon discovery presumably reached him. His latest voicemail captured the shift. "Olivia, please call me back. This Horizon situation isn't what it appears. I was protecting the company's assets, not stealing them. We need to talk before this escalates further. Think about the kids, about our family reputation." The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me sad. Morgan still believed he could control the narrative, could persuade me to ignore objective evidence with appeals to family and vague warnings about reputation. A text from my mother provided welcome distraction. "Kids fed and homework done. Emma needs black leggings for tomorrow's dress rehearsal. In your closet?" I smiled at the mundane normalcy of the request amid the corporate drama of my day. Second, drawer in her dresser. "Thank you for handling everything. Should be home by 7:30. Just as I was gathering my things to leave, my direct line rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Olivia Pendleton," I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Pendleton, this is Samuel Winters, Patricia's husband." I straightened instinctively, though he couldn't see me. Samuel Winters was a legendary figure in the financial world, the founder of Winters Capital and a major influence in investment circles. He rarely involved himself directly in the companies where his wife held board positions. "Mr. Winters, what can I do for you?" I asked, curious about this unexpected contact. "I hear you've had quite an eventful first day as CEO," he began, his tone inscrutable. "Patricia has been keeping me informed of developments at Pendleton." I waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "She was particularly impressed by your handling of the Horizon Dynamics revelation," he continued. "Many new executives would have immediately pursued scorched earth legal remedies against Morgan, regardless of collateral damage to the company." "That wouldn't serve anyone's interests," I replied carefully. "Especially not the employees and clients who depend on Pendleton's survival." "Precisely," he agreed, "which is why I'm calling. Winters Capital has been considering investments in the adaptive learning space for some time. Your core technology at Pendleton has significant potential, despite the company's current financial challenges." My pulse quickened. "Are you suggesting Winters Capital might be interested in investing in Pendleton Tech?" "I'm suggesting we might be interested in discussing possibilities," he clarified smoothly. "Not a bailout, but a strategic investment if you can demonstrate a viable path forward under your leadership. I'm presenting a comprehensive restructuring and product development plan to the board the day after tomorrow," I informed him. "I'd be happy to share that with Winters Capital as well." "Excellent. Have your team send the materials to my office, and we'll arrange a meeting next week to discuss next steps." He paused briefly. "And Olivia. Off the record, I've known Morgan since he started Pendleton. Ambitious, but always cutting corners. Patricia told me how you handled the board meetings. Impressive for someone returning to business after years away." The backhanded compliment might have bothered me once, but now I recognized it as the generational perspective it was. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. I find that solid financial analysis and ethical leadership principles remain relevant regardless of how recently they've been applied in a corporate setting. His chuckle suggested approval of my response. Indeed they do. I look forward to reviewing your plans. As I drove home, the significance of Samuel Winter's call settled over me. Winter's Capital was no minor player. Their involvement could potentially solve Pendleton's immediate financial crisis and provide the runway needed to fully develop the core technology. It wouldn't be a simple cash infusion. Winters was known for hands-on involvement in his investments, but it represented a validation of both the company's potential and my leadership that I hadn't anticipated so quickly. The house was quiet. When I arrived, the children already in bed, despite my best efforts to make it home at a reasonable hour. My mother sat at the kitchen island, a glass of wine in hand and an expression of curious anticipation on her face. "So," she began, without preamble, "how does it feel to fire your husband's girlfriend on your first day as CEO?" I laughed, despite my exhaustion, dropping my briefcase and kicking off the heels that had been pinching my feet for hours. Strangely anticlimactic, honestly. And it was a business decision, not a personal one. Mom raised a skeptical eyebrow. And I suppose discovering their secret company to steal Pendleton's assets was just another day at the office. I paused in the act of pouring my own glass of wine. "How do you know about Horizon?" She smiled enigmatically. "I had lunch with Judith Latimer today. Board members' wives talk, you know." "Great," I sighed, sitting beside her. "Corporate confidentiality at its finest." "Don't worry, it's not public knowledge, just upper echelon gossip." She studied me with the penetrating gaze that had seen through my childhood fibs and teenage evasions. "The question is, how are you really doing with all this?" I considered the question seriously, taking inventory of my emotional state beyond the professional facade I'd maintained all day. Honestly, I'm angry, but not in the way people might expect. I'm not angry about Vanessa personally. That relationship is just a symptom of Morgan's larger character issues. I'm angry about the deliberate sabotage of a company with genuine potential, about the jobs that have been lost because of his mismanagement, about the ways he dismissed my intelligence while making increasingly poor business decisions himself. Mom nodded, letting me continue my self-assessment. But beneath the anger, there's something else, I realized as I spoke. A kind of exhilaration. I've spent so many years filtering myself, making myself smaller to accommodate Morgan's ego, hiding my capabilities to avoid threatening his sense of superiority. And now, I don't have to do that anymore. I can think as clearly and move as decisively as I need to. It's liberating. "That's the daughter I raised," Mom said with quiet approval. "The one who was always going to be too much for a man like Morgan to handle once she remembered her own power." I sipped my wine, letting her words settle over me. "Samuel Winters called me just before I left the office. Winters Capital is considering a strategic investment in Pendleton." Mom's eyebrows shot up. "Samuel Winters himself? Not one of his associates?" I nodded. "Apparently, Patricia has been keeping him informed of recent developments." "That's significant," Mom observed. "Winters doesn't involve himself unless he sees exceptional potential, either in the company or its leadership. Or both," I added, allowing myself a moment of pride. "He wants to review my restructuring plan next week." "And Morgan? What happens to him now?" The question brought me back to the complicated reality of our situation. Professionally, he's on administrative leave while we investigate the Horizon situation. Personally, I trailed off, unsure how to articulate the nebulous state of our marriage. "He came by here today," Mom said suddenly. "Looking for you." I sat up straighter. "He came to the house? When?" "Around 4. I didn't let him in. Told him you were at work and the children at activities," which was mostly true. Emma was at dress rehearsal and Aiden at his coding class. What did he want? Mom shrugged. To talk, he said. He seemed desperate, not angry, just panicked. Asked me to have you call him, said it was urgent. I pulled out my phone, reviewing the missed calls and messages I'd ignored all day. He's been trying to reach me since the Horizon discovery became known. The board placed him on leave, his corporate access has been revoked, and his careful exit strategy has been exposed. Of course he's panicking. Are you going to call him back? I considered the question carefully. Not tonight. Whatever he wants to discuss can wait until I've had time to review the full Horizon documentation. With legal counsel, I won't be manipulated into making concessions based on partial information. Mom studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, when you told me you'd purchased Morgan's company, I worried it might be an impulsive reaction to his affair, a grand gesture of revenge that you hadn't fully thought through. And now? I prompted when she paused. Now I see it was something else entirely. A strategic reclamation of your power, yes, but also a genuine rescue mission. For a company that might actually thrive under proper leadership. She raised her glass in a small toast. Morgan never deserved you, Olivia, and he certainly doesn't deserve to run Pendleton Tech. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the truth of her words resonate within me. Tomorrow's another full day. Town hall meeting with the staff, development planning with Tara Okoye, and preparation for the board presentation. And Emma's dress rehearsal at 6:30, Mom reminded me gently, which I will absolutely be at. I confirmed, setting an alarm on my phone as immediate proof of my commitment. CEO or not, I'm still their mother first. As I climbed the stairs to check on my sleeping children, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past 72 hours. From underestimated wife to corporate savior, from Morgan's shadow to the potential partner of Winter's capital. The journey had only just begun, but already the path ahead looked remarkably different than the one I'd been traveling for the past 15 years. Emma stirred slightly as I kissed her forehead, her eyes fluttering open briefly. Mom, did you fire Dad's girlfriend today? I smiled at her directness. Go back to sleep, sweetheart. We can talk about work tomorrow. Good, she murmured, already drifting back toward sleep. She was mean to Aiden. I froze, filing away this new information for future contemplation. What else had happened during those unauthorized meetings with my children that I didn't yet know about? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, both professional and personal. But tonight, in the quiet of my children's rooms, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple truth. The woman Morgan had dismissed as just a stay-at-home mom was proving to be exactly the leader Pendleton Tech needed, and precisely the mother my children deserved. 1 year later, I stood at the podium in Pendleton Tech's newly renovated headquarters, surveying the gathered employees, board members, and investors. The quarterly all-hands meeting had become a tradition under my leadership, a stark contrast to Morgan's closed-door management style. Today marks 1 year since our restructuring began, I said, the microphone carrying my voice through the packed conference center. When I took over as CEO, Pendleton Tech had 6 weeks of operating capital remaining. Our core product was behind schedule, client confidence was shattered, and many predicted our imminent collapse. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. No one present had forgotten those precarious days. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Pendleton Tech has achieved profitability for the second consecutive quarter. I continued, gesturing toward the projection screen where our financial results appeared in vivid green. Revenue has increased 42% year over year. Client retention is at 94%. And our adaptive learning platform has been recognized as industry-leading by 3 independent research firms. Applause erupted, particularly enthusiastic from the development team where Trent and his engineers sat together, their pride evident. They had been the backbone of our recovery, working tirelessly to refine the core technology while delivering consistently ahead of schedule. This success belongs to everyone in this room, I acknowledged, making eye contact with key team members. Especially those who stayed through the uncertainty, who believed in our technology and our future when both seemed in jeopardy. William Chen nodded slightly from his seat beside Patricia Winters in the front row. As CFO, he had masterfully managed our financial resurrection, stretching limited resources while providing realistic projections that built credibility with investors and clients alike. The Winters capital investment last spring provided crucial runway, I continued, acknowledging Samuel Winters, who sat with his typical inscrutable expression. But it was your innovation and dedication that transformed that opportunity into sustainable success. As I outlined strategic priorities for the coming year, expansion into healthcare analytics, the upcoming launch of our self-service platform, planned hiring in key technical roles, I couldn't help reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. The settlement with Morgan had been finalized 9 months ago, remarkably civilized, despite the circumstances that necessitated it. He had accepted my continued ownership of the Pendleton Tech shares without contest, focusing instead on generous visitation rights with the children and fair division of our other assets. Our interactions had evolved from bitter resentment to a cautious co-parenting relationship that, while never warm, remained respectful. Morgan had surprised everyone by declining lucrative offers from competing firms, instead launching a modest consulting practice focused on helping startups avoid the very mistakes that had nearly destroyed Pendleton Tech. I'd heard through industry contacts that he spoke candidly about his failures as a leader, using his own downfall as an object lesson for young entrepreneurs. Whether this represented genuine growth or simply professional reinvention remained unclear, but the change was undeniable. Before I close, I said, returning my attention to the present, I want to share some exciting news. The board has unanimously approved our acquisition of NeuroSynth Technologies, whose complementary machine learning platform will accelerate our development roadmap by approximately 18 months. The announcement generated excited whispers throughout the room. We had kept the acquisition talks tightly confidential, with only the board and senior leadership aware of the negotiations. This strategic growth represents exactly what I envisioned when I stepped into this role. Not expansion for its own sake, but careful investment in technologies and talent that strengthen our core offering and create genuine value for our clients. As the meeting concluded and employees dispersed to afternoon tasks, Patricia Winters approached with her characteristic directness. "Excellent results, Olivia," she said, offering a rare smile. "Samuel is quite pleased with the return on investment. Thus far, though you'll never get him to admit it publicly. I'm more interested in his continued support for the NeuroSynth acquisition," I replied. The board vote was unanimous, but his influence was undoubtedly crucial. Patricia nodded. "He recognizes sound strategy when he sees it. Speaking of which," she glanced around to ensure privacy before continuing, "Winters Capital is assembling a technology investment council. Samuel would like you to consider joining as an advisor. Quarterly meetings, review of potential investments in the analytics space, that sort of thing." The invitation represented significant professional recognition beyond my role at Pendleton. "I'm flattered," I said sincerely. "Please tell him I'd be interested in discussing details." "He'll be pleased," Patricia replied, though not surprised. "He identified your potential long before the rest of us caught up." As Patricia departed, William approached with the latest acquisition paperwork requiring my signature. "NeuroSynth's team is excited," he reported, "especially about maintaining their development autonomy while gaining our client base and infrastructure." "That was key to my pitch," I acknowledged, signing the necessary documents. "Their technology is brilliant, but they struggled with commercialization. Our established client relationships and implementation experience solve their greatest challenge." "The perfect symbiotic acquisition," William agreed. "Unlike those conglomerate monstrosities Morgan used to pursue that made no strategic sense." I smiled at his candor, now commonplace among the leadership team. Speaking of Morgan, did you see the article in Tech Ventures about his new mentorship program for first-time founders? William nodded. Surprisingly insightful piece. His perspective on ego-driven leadership failures was uncommonly self-aware. People can change, I observed, gathering my materials, when circumstances force them to confront their mistakes. Some people, William amended with characteristic precision, those capable of genuine self-reflection. Whether Morgan truly belonged in that category remained uncertain, but his behavior over the past year suggested at least partial recognition of his failures. He had been consistent in his time with Emma and Aiden, never missing a scheduled visit or school event. Our interactions remained strictly limited to co-parenting necessities, but within those boundaries, he had proven surprisingly reliable. My assistant Jenny interrupted my thoughts, appearing at the conference room door. Sorry to interrupt, but Emma's school called. She forgot her presentation materials for her science symposium this afternoon. The genomics project she's been obsessing over for weeks, I realized with a mother's instant recognition. Where are the materials now? Still at home, apparently, on the dining room table where she was making last-minute adjustments this morning. I checked my watch. The science symposium began at 3:30, and I had back-to-back meetings scheduled. Until 5 hours, including a crucial call with NeuroSynth's development team. I'll handle it, William offered unexpectedly. My afternoon is mostly financial review for the acquisition, nothing that can't wait an hour. His thoughtfulness exemplified the supportive culture we'd built at Pendleton Tech, where work-family balance wasn't just permitted but actively facilitated. Thank you, William. The presentation is in a blue folder with Emma's name on it. My mother can let you in. She's there today. As William departed on his rescue mission, I headed to my office to prepare for the remaining meetings. The CEO suite, formerly Morgan's domain of mahogany and masculine pretension, had been transformed into a light-filled, functional space that reflected my more collaborative leadership style. Glass walls had replaced solid barriers, symbolizing the transparency that now defined company operations. The afternoon progressed efficiently until my last meeting concluded at 5:15. I gathered my things quickly, determined to reach Emma's science symposium before it ended at 6 rounds. As I rushed toward the elevator, Trent Jackson called out from the development area. CEO Pendleton, got a second? We just solved the healthcare data integration problem. I hesitated, torn between professional excitement and maternal responsibility. 2-minute version now, I decided, approaching his workstation. Detailed review tomorrow morning. Trent quickly outlined their breakthrough, which would significantly accelerate our healthcare analytics initiative. I absorbed the technical explanation, asked several clarifying questions, and congratulated the team on their innovation. This is excellent work, I concluded. Schedule a proper review for 9:00 tomorrow so the entire leadership team can understand the implications. Racing to my car, I called my mother for a symposium update. Emma presented beautifully, she reported. The judges were clearly impressed, especially when she explained how she interpreted the statistical variations in her data. I'm 15 minutes away, I promised, navigating through evening traffic. Save me a seat if they're doing awards. When I arrived at the school auditorium, slipping quietly through the side door, I immediately spotted my family in the front section. Emma stood with other finalists on stage, her posture confident as she answered a judge's question about her methodology. Aiden sat beside my mother, unusually still as he watched his sister, with evident pride. And beside them, somewhat to my surprise, sat Morgan. Our eyes met briefly as I slid into the empty seat they'd saved. He nodded in acknowledgement, then returned his attention to Emma's presentation. The simple courtesy reflected our new normal. Civil, respectful distance maintained for the children's benefit. When Emma was announced as the symposium winner, her face lit with excitement as she searched the audience. The joy that flashed across her features upon seeing both her parents present momentarily transcended all the complicated history between us. As the ceremony concluded and families gathered to congratulate participants, Emma rushed toward us, clutching her award certificate. "You both came!" she exclaimed, embracing us simultaneously in an enthusiastic group hug that momentarily bridged the careful distance Morgan and I typically maintained. "Wouldn't have missed it," Morgan assured her, genuine pride evident in his voice. "Your statistical analysis was particularly impressive." "Mom's been helping me with that part," Emma acknowledged, glancing at me. "But Dad helped me design the initial experiment when I got stuck last month." This collaborative mention of both our contributions reflected Emma's growing comfort with our separated reality, a significant evolution from the anger and confusion she'd initially expressed. As we stood together admiring Emma's project display, an observer might have momentarily mistaken us for an intact family unit, rather than the carefully restructured co-parenting arrangement we had become. The moment held no romantic nostalgia for what was lost, but rather a quiet acknowledgement that healing was possible even after profound betrayal and transformation. "Dinner to celebrate?" my mother suggested, including Morgan with a glance that contained neither warmth nor hostility, simply pragmatic acceptance of his role in her grandchildren's lives. "I can't tonight," Morgan replied with what appeared to be genuine regret. "Early client meeting tomorrow in Seattle, flying out in an hour." As the children said their goodbyes to their father, I found myself reflecting on the parallel journeys Morgan and I had traveled over the past year. Both of us had been forced to reconceptualize our identities, mine expanding beyond the domesticity that had gradually confined me, his contracting from the corporate titan he had fashioned himself into. The acquisition announcement went well, Morgan observed quietly when the children were momentarily distracted with my mother. "Neurosynth is a smart strategic fit." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the professional acknowledgement without surprise. We had gradually developed a cautious capacity for such exchanges, brief recognitions of each other's post-marriage evolution. "Samuel Winters called me last week," he added, his expression unreadable. "Asked for my perspective on Neurosynth's technology compatibility." This was unexpected. "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that your strategic vision for integration was sound, and that Pendleton is better positioned for this acquisition under your leadership than it ever would have been under mine." The admission, clear-eyed and without self-pity, suggested a level of self-awareness I wouldn't have believed possible from the Morgan I had married. "That couldn't have been easy to say," I observed, studying him with genuine curiosity. He shrugged slightly. "Easier than continuing to lie to myself about what happened. My therapist calls it radical acceptance, acknowledging reality without defensive distortions." Before I could respond, the children returned, Emma still bubbling with excitement about her award and already planning enhancements for her project before the state competition. As Morgan departed and we headed home for a celebration dinner, I found myself contemplating the extraordinary journey from underestimated wife to recognized business leader, from fragile family unit to resilient reconfigured connections held together by love for the children at the center. The woman Morgan had dismissed as just a stay-at-home mom had not only rescued his failing company, but transformed it into something stronger and more valuable than it had ever been under his leadership. The professional vindication was satisfying, but the personal reclamation of my identity and capabilities provided deeper fulfillment. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing final details for the Neurosynth integration while planning logistics for Emma's state science competition the following month. The dual focus no longer felt like competing priorities, but complementary aspects of a life reclaimed on my own terms CEO. Mother and woman finally recognized for her full capabilities in both boardroom and home. The journey hadn't been easy, nor was it complete. But standing firmly in my reclaimed power, I faced the future with confidence that whatever challenges arose, professional or personal, I would meet them not as someone's wife or someone's mother, but as fully and unapologetically myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.